Hi, everyone. Welcome to a KE Report webinar. In this webinar, I am featuring Kootenay Silver, traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol KTN and on the OTC markets under the symbol KOOYF. I have Jim McDonald joining me. He is the president and CEO of the company. The company is focused in Mexico. It's an exploration company with a fairly large asset base in terms of silver resources already defined. But where we're going to be focusing here is mostly on the drill program that is happening at the Columba property. The company has a 50,000 meter multi-stage program planned this year, drilling right around 20,000 meters to get to an initial maiden resource to add to the underlying resources. I'm going to let Jim run through this presentation and interject questions throughout to hopefully get you the most information we can. And as the company releases drill results and news releases, be sure to come back to the KE Report website. So I will follow up with Jim, getting updates on ongoing drill results and how this asset is developing. So Jim, thank you very much for taking some time to walk us through the company's story and, more importantly, the drill program that is ongoing. You can kick us off here, Jim.
Great. Okay, thanks, Corey. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for hosting us. So, okay, we'll run through this presentation, and then you'll be asking questions as we go along, and hopefully we give a real good review of Kootenay and what we're doing. So Kootenay Silver, as you pointed out, we're an exploration company. We're focused in Mexico for the discovery of silver deposits. We've had a lot of success in discovering 3 different deposits so far, which gives us a very large resource base in 3 different deposits with 43-101 reports on them. And then what's particularly exciting at the moment is we're in the middle of a brand new discovery on the property we call Columba, which is a classic high-grade Mexican vein system, getting some just incredible numbers out of there, widths and grades, with size potential. Looks like it could be in the range of 100 million ounces or even multiples of that, and you'll see why as we flip through the slide deck. And so we will be making forward-looking statements here. I'll just flip back to that. We'll refer you to our website where you can read through this. So just be aware of that during the presentation. Touched on this slide already. We trade pretty close to the silver price because of the large resource base we have. It's one of the largest junior-owned silver resource bases in Mexico. Gives us a lot of leverage to that silver price. And then we've got this explosive upside because of this discovery at Columba. And we've got a lot of drilling going on. We've got 2 drills on site right now, and 20,000 meters planned for to be completed by end of year and leading to a maiden resource. Capital structure, you can see here, just shy of 60 million shares, options and warrants, the current market cap of around 82 million. That's maybe 72 million today. And average daily volume, 90 days, around 200,000. That fluctuates a lot according to the silver price, and will range up over 500,000 when there is some excitement in that silver market in general. Cash position is actually around 10 million now. We did a couple of financings earlier this year to finance this 20,000 meters of drilling, so we're really well financed, in a good position. Key shareholders, you can see there's some notable names like Eric Sprott. Condire is a fund out of Dallas, Texas. Management directors. Institutions include some very well-known resource funds, and a lot of the institutional investment is in Switzerland, actually, and held there and managed money. We've had major mining companies invest in us a number of times in the past because of the discoveries we've made. It's a testament to the success of our team and the company in making discoveries. Coeur Mining invested in us because of the La Cigarra discovery. Agnico Eagle because of our original Promontorio discovery. And then Pan American Silver invested into us because of a second discovery on that same Promontorio property. And we'll
But
come
Jim,
back.
are these majors still shareholders here? Do they hold a position in the company? Do they hold any stakes in the projects?
Yeah, no, they don't. But they have invested in the past. And at one time, Pan American, on the La Negra discovery, they made a deal with us where they're going to carry that project all the way into production, providing all the capital and leaving us with 25% if La Negra got to 50 million ounces. Now, we just did a resource update on La Negra and Promontorio to include that La Negra discovery, and it didn't get to that 50 million ounce size, so Pan American turned it back before they earned any interest. But it's a real nice deposit for a smaller company, we think, with potential for real high margins, and we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Okay, one more quick question. Warrants, 21 million outstanding, a little bit more than that. What's the average strike price there?
Just let me flip to the back here. Got a table actually.
Oh, okay, thank you. It's a nice tight share structure with the 55 million outstanding. Just wondering where the warrants.
Yeah, it's really good structure here. So here you can see it. This was April 29th. Expiry date starting next March. And the prices here ranging from 95 cents to 220. You can see there.
Mostly over $1. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That helps. Jim, have there been any rollbacks in the share structure within?
Yeah, we did a 10-to-1 consolidation.
When did that happen?
That happened last fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's just good to keep people up to date there.
Yeah. So a little bit about the history of Kootenay Silver. We've been around a long time. We've been in Mexico quite a while. I've been involved in Mexico since the year 2000 when we, with a deal called National Gold, we put together the Mulatos deposit, bought that from Placer Dome and Kennecott. And then we brought in John McCluskey to help us finance that acquisition, him and Chester Miller. And that resulted in the formation of those two juniors into forming Alamos Gold. I stepped off that board in 2012. And so that was a real eye-opener to me as to Mexico and the potential in Mexico. And so we've been down working in Mexico since around 2006 and have made several discoveries, as I just touched on it. And Mexico still offers incredible opportunity. And the Columba discovery here is a testament to that. We came into that project over 4 years ago now. And when we cut the option to earn 100%, which we now have, there'd been no work done in that property in almost 40 years. It's just incredible. Yet there'd been 2 periods of production, historic production there, historic assay reports of real high grades in the one little area that they did mine a little bit, and just sitting there, no exploration. So Mexico still holds this incredible opportunity for new discovery. So on this slide here, just getting back to the slide deck, you can see here what we've already touched on these items. Now the resource base is 214 million ounces of silver equivalent in the M&I and another 54.9 in the inferred on those 3 deposits, Promontorio, La Negra, and La Cigarra. And we updated the Promontorio resource report in October to include that La Negra discovery. And then we updated La Cigarra early this year. We published a new report in it because the old resource model was diluting the grade. And we went in and relogged all the core and developed a very rigorous geologic model. And that demonstrated that, yeah, the old resource model was diluting the grade, and the grade was actually better than reported before. So we took the grade from a open pit constrained 85 grams up to 102 grams. So big improvement there. And it's very important on that particular project, La Cigarra, because at a $30 silver price on paper, it starts to look pretty interesting, like it could produce a very positive PEA potentially. So we've just updated the resource, all the reports on those resource projects so that they're ready to advance when the silver market gets more mature, and that's our plan. Meanwhile, we're focusing our efforts and money on getting the Columba property to a maiden resource and getting it up to 100 million ounces in size.
Okay. So really that's the leverage to the silver price that you're talking about here with the resources in place. Would you do any further work on these properties with resources, or right now the focus all on Columba and the higher grade potential?
Yeah, right now the focus absolutely is on Columba and that high grade potential. Grade works at any silver price, and it works a lot better at a high price, of course. So we're really focused on it. However, we will come back to those other projects once we get a little more advanced in what we believe we're just entered in the early stages of a new silver bull market here that could last for some time. And so we've positioned those projects so that they're ready when the market's receptive to them, and will be accretive to spend money there.
Would you welcome any suitors, any partners, any potential takeovers or spinouts for those assets?
Yeah, the door is wide open as to how to advance them. So it could be a spin out, could be a sale of them if the price has to be right. So we're pretty open-minded to how to get those advanced.
Okay, thank you. Let's get into the discoveries then.
Okay, so flipping into the projects are all in northern Mexico. You can see here this red line depicts the famous Sierra Madre trend, where many of the big silver mining districts are historic districts in mining and currently mining. Our La Cigarra resource sits within one of those famous districts called Parel, where almost 1 billion ounces of silver have been produced there. Then the Columba flagship property, this new discovery, is in northern Chihuahua, just on the extension of that famous trend. Then our other resource deposits are on the Promontorio property, where Promontorio and La Negra sit. That's in southern Sonora State. And all the recent milestones and catalysts are really centered around advancing the Columba and financing that project and getting that drilling going. So now we've got 20,000 meter program underway, and we're executing that program with 2 drills and looking to bring Columba to the maiden resource stage. I touched on this already. The Columba project had 2 periods of historic mining, 1900 and 1910, and they were getting ready for some pretty serious production then, because they put a shaft down 200 meters. They put 6 levels off that shaft, getting ready to production and actually producing. And it was shut down by the Mexican Revolution. And it was the historic assay records from those different levels off that shaft that got us interested, because it showed real nice high-grade silver very consistently along the length of it and depth. And so we picked up the option to earn 100% on that basis. The mine is flooded, so we couldn't re-enter it at the time and directly sample, but we were comfortable enough those were accurate reports, and they certainly have turned out to be. We've since drilled over 30,000 meters and 147 holes since that time. And and certainly confirmed those high grades. I mean, we're getting, and in fact, that historic vein is not even the best vein. We're on to drilling what we call the D vein now, that's got better widths and better grades even. And then there's numerous other veins with high grades with good widths as well that need yet to be followed up on. And so just quickly, there was a second period of production in the mid 1900s, sort of 1958 to 1960. And that was a private company that operated just for a couple of years, utilizing the development from that older work. And so when we entered that property 4.5 years ago or so, there'd been no work done in almost 40 years. In the early 80s, a company came in, started to dewater that mine, but then they bought an operating mine somewhere else and left the project.
So the
And
initial
so,
targeting, was it really just focused around the mine workings? And since then you've expanded out to some of these other areas?
yeah, first thing we wanted to do is confirm the high grade reports, those assay reports, because we couldn't get into the old mine. It's flooded. And so that was the first drilling was across that vein, which we call the F vein. And it was quite successful. We'll see in another next slide here, a couple of highlights. And in fact, on the F vein, we've drilled over 40 holes now, and we've defined consistent hits on that vein for over 700 meters in length and to over 200, almost a 250-meter depth. Still open to depth and still with high grade at depth in some places on that vein. So there is a resource there. We know that yet is to be estimated, but that will be part of our maiden resource certainly. So what we did immediately after that first round then is start to test some of the other veins we saw at surface. And at the beginning of this year, we had done 147 holes across the project on a number of different veins. And we were getting intercepts like 6 meters at 2,000 grams per ton in one area. This highlight here is 17 meters at 650 and 34 meters a half kilo. That's on what we call the D vein. Those two holes sit above one another 90 meters apart. And so 90 meters apart, and you got that consistent hit and fantastic hits like that. So it's a real good zone, that particular zone. And so the geologic setting here is it's an old volcano, and you can kind of see that in this image here. You see this rim going around. That's the volcanic rim. And then in the middle where this picture and the arrow are is a volcanic cone. So that's the bottom of the old volcano, and it's erosion low. And that's important because it's just barely exposed the top of the veins where they become productive. So we have what we're calling a grade line at around 1,750 meters plus or minus. When you're above that, your vein is not well developed. You can follow your structure, but the vein's not well developed. In fact, you may have no vein at all. You may have only a breccia, and your silver values will even drop back into background and be not even anomalous in some cases. Yet when you drill below that grade line, the vein becomes well developed, becomes consistent, and has high grade in it. So that means that geologically, this thing has suffered barely any erosion at all. It's almost perfectly intact. Whatever was originally put down here in terms of silver ounces is basically still all there. It's almost entirely preserved. So an incredible scenario here to have such little erosion, and also to come into a property and be able to fairly quickly determine where you are in this epithermal column. These veins are called epithermal veins. And so they'll have a top and a bottom. And if you don't have any erosion, you'll see your top and above like we do. So we know we're right at the very top. And so as a rule of thumb, when we're drilling the property, we want to get to that 1,750 meter elevation above sea level and deeper.
What about chasing these veins outside of that volcanic lip? We can see how some of them look like they extend. Have you
Yeah.
tested outside of simply the volcano?
Yeah, no, they do. And they have grade beyond there. So in this direction from upper left to lower right, it's 4 kilometers in scope. The other direction is 3 kilometers. And so when you start in the middle here, you see that picture of the old shaft, and you walk up that vein, you go up the hill to the rim of the volcano, you start losing that vein and getting into your structure, and your values will go down right down to 5 grams. Right at that shaft site, they can be up to, at surface, up to over 600 grams in places. So, and then get to the top, you're dropping into background. And as you walk down these structures going to the lower right, this one over here we call the J vein in the far right, when you get down into that drainage area, you see that arroyo, that's about the same elevation as that shaft again. And suddenly you're starting to get anomalous silver of over 100 grams there. Bang, there it is. So that implies, and we have to prove it with drilling yet because we haven't drilled any of that extent going that direction. but that certainly is demonstrating that these the whole length of these structures are productive in silver.
Okay.
And so when you look at the scope of that system, 4 kilometers by 3 kilometers, compared to some well-known, more recent discoveries in Mexico, much more advanced than us. In the middle is the Panuca discovery by Vizsla. They're now over 300 million ounces. And then on the far left is the Silvercrest discovery, which has been in production for a couple of years here at least. Classic high-grade vein system. And so these are all the same scale. So we've got the physical size and scope to have something pretty large. That 100 million ounce target is what we're talking about. And then when you look at the results we're getting, that certainly augments that belief and supports that thesis that we believe that this project has that resource potential and more.
So when you're making these comparisons, is it about grade then? If you're saying you have about the same size in terms of strike mineralization, is it grade or is it density of veins? How do we go about comparing rather than just looking at this map?
Well, the first step is just to see your physical size of your system. Then the number of veins. We've got dozens of different veins. You see in the case of Silvercrest over there, there's many, many dozens of different veins they have. These are apples and oranges in a lot of respects. We're a pretty pure silver with some lead zinc. The one in the middle is silver, lead, zinc plus gold, and the one on the left is gold, silver, almost evenly divided. The one in the far left is pretty narrow veins. They're kind of a 1 meter to 2 meter wide veins. In the middle, it's quite variable. They have some very fat zones. And then similarly with us, we have some narrow veins and then we have some very wide veins as well. So it's a little bit of apples and oranges, but they're all classic epithermal vein systems.
Okay. Hey, the one on the left is a mine. The one on the middle just put out really strong economics. Now I guess it's on you guys to move through that stage.
Well, exactly. And that's where we want to arrive. Now, something to point out important here is when you get into these vein districts, you have a handful of key structures or key veins that will have the majority of the ounces in them. And that example on the far left, that Las Chispas mine, this area in the lower central, that 80% of their ounces are in those veins down there. So that makes all the rest work. And in the case of the Panuca discovery, I think it was their second resource they made. They discovered a new zone that was blind to surface, and it took the resources from around 100 million ounces to about 200 million in one new zone. And so spectacular zone, obviously, but those kind of structures really make the whole district work because that supports getting a mine into production, and then everything else that all the other zones around can be then mined.
Yeah, you need that high grade area, right? So
it's not just the
hopefully
grade,
we
but
can
it's
focus on that. Point us to the high grade area here, Jim.
yeah. So it's the grade plus the number of ounces that are in those zones. So when you get a whole bunch of ounces concentrated in one area, that really improves your economics, obviously, because you're not having to put development all over the place to try to get at your ounces. It's one spot you can get a whole bunch of your ounces, and that pays for everything, and then everything else just adds to it. So here we are. Here you see the gray shaded areas. This is concessions that we don't own. Everything else we do. And we're just showing some highlights across the property. In the middle here, in the very middle is that historic F vein. We're getting hits like 9 meters over 300 grams, 2 meters of 800 grams. There's another vein beside that one that is blind to surface, which we didn't expect to hit, but there it was. And it's getting up to 2 kilos per ton over 1 meter to 2 meters wide, that particular vein. So there's a second vein there as well. And this thing goes down to over 200-meter depth. This area in the upper right, JZ vein area here, we're getting some spectacular hits up there, 6 meters at 2,000 grams per ton. We're showing in the far right here, narrow interval of 0.5 kilo. And what's important about that is that's easternmost hole that we have, and at surface you've got like 5 gram gold. You don't even see veining, you see breccia, but when you drill down to that grade line level, there it is. Now down here in the lower central, we got two sets of sort of vein corridors here. This B vein set, which is kind of the extension of that historic F vein, very lightly drilled so far. Part of this program is going to go in and start systematically stepping out here to define this size of this area. But we're getting hits there like 4.6 meters, almost 1,200 grams per ton. And then the D vein, we've drilled quite a bit now. This is where we're concentrating at the moment in the lower central. This D vein, this is where we got the 34 meters a half kilo. There's almost 2.5 meters of nearly 6,000 grams per ton silver in that hole. It's the deepest hole in that vein, in fact. 90 meters above it was this interval where there's almost 30 meters over 400 grams, with 17 of those meters at 650 grams per ton. And so we've, at the beginning of this drill program this year, we had to find consistent hits for 450 meters of length on the D vein. And then the first release about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we're doing pretty big step outs just to find the edge of that zone. So then we'll come back in and infill. And we did pretty big 100 to 200 meter step outs. And we took on the first bit of drilling, we took that strike length from 450 meters and went to 650 meters. And now we're stepping out further, and we'll have some more results coming out pretty soon here.
Jim, do we need to be, it looks like a lot of this drilling is also coming right up to that border, as you mentioned, the land that's owned by other parties. Any strategy on acquiring that? Does that restrict drilling, mineralization at all?
Well, you see here, these are pretty narrow zones here, but yeah, we want to pick that ground up. Certainly, we're talking about it, but it's not. I mean, it's not necessary. It's something we want to consolidate. Certainly,
that's fair. Now, what sort of spacings is the drilling going to be on when you complete this year's program?
So we've got an independent QP looking at the data and everything, and he says that 100 meters spacing should be enough for at least inferred. So that's where we're starting. We're going to have 100 meters and less. So for example, on the F vein, so far most of the drilling is 50 to 75 meters spaced. On the D vein, we've got 450 meters is pretty well drilled at around 50 to 75 meter spacing. And right now we're stepping out 100 meters plus at a time. So by the time we get to resource, it's going to be 100 meters or less. That's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of holes in this thing by the end of this year's program.
Yeah, we will. We're now about 5,000 meters into this 20,000 meter program right now.
Okay. Yeah, adding that to the 135 holes already drilled.
Yeah. Yes. And so we have released up to, I think, hole 153 or 154 now. And so we'll be having a news release out pretty quick on about another how many holes? About another 8 to 10 holes approximately. And that'll be fairly soon, I think. We're just waiting on some more final assays to come in.
Okay. Now, is it fair to say that you're focusing on the higher grade areas, or are you focusing more broadly on still this overall project, and maybe in subsequent programs go back in to focus more on the higher grade sections?
What we're doing right now is just trying to find the limits on that D vein, because the hits there are so spectacular, so consistent. And so we've got this plane, which is the vein, and we've got this fat zone of mineralization. We're just going out laterally and to depth to see where the edges are going to be. Typically, these things can be sort of eye-shaped, where they're open up into these nice broad zones, and there's edges to them. And so that's the first step, is to find those edges, then go back in and get enough density so you can have confidence for a resource estimate. The other thing that can happen on these veins is you could have several zones like that along the length of the vein. They'll open and close. So what we're doing right now on the D vein is on this particular one that's at least 650 meters long. We're trying to find that edge first. Then we'll come back in, start to add density of drilling to it. And then we'll take another drill and go into that B vein where the 4.6 meters of 1,200 grams is up in here. And we'll start doing the same thing, just stepping out until you find the edges. And then we'll move a drill up into this J vein area here, this very long 4-kilometer long vein where we're getting some hits of about 6 meters or 2,000 grams per ton. And we'll start to define these zones systematically. And where there's no red dots on this image, has been no drilling.
Yeah.
So that's another aspect. All these things need to be done, but the focus right now is on already where we have hits. Let's start to get enough drill information where we can define the zones, how big they are, and then start to drill these areas that haven't even been touched yet.
Okay. Yeah, still very much exploration focus. Let's move to some of the cross sections so we can dive a little bit more into some of the depth component of these and other drill results.
So we'll look at some long sections here, the F, B, and D veins.
Yeah.
This is the historic vein here. And the long section is just, you're looking at the plane of the vein like this. You're not looking at a cross section. This is the plane of the vein. This here in the middle is the shaft, the historic shaft. These are the 6 tunnels that were put off of it. And what we're just showing the main vein itself, and then there's the vein and there's a stockwork to these things. And the stockworks can be pretty meaty. They can be 5 to 25 meters wide on the F vein, and they'll carry a medium grade, sort of 100 to 200 grams within them. And then the vein proper itself will be the high grade. This is where you'll get these hits in there like 2.5 meters, 800 grams per ton. You look in the far left. Really, the thing to point out here is you go across the whole system over to the far right here, hole 92. We're still into over 400 grams per ton there. And as we go to depth, some of these deepest holes here, hole 123, we're still into 700 gram material. That's about 250 meters deep. And then this hole 121, is it? It's over 2,000 grams per ton over a narrow 1.6 meters. So it's still open. And then there's this hang wall, other vein parallel to it that we're not even showing. Consistent hits along 700 meters of length here. We probably will want to add some holes in these gap areas that you see, just a few holes, not many, to get enough density for a resource statement.
And you're mostly going down to about 250 meters still?
Yeah, and we'll start putting some deeper holes in, but the deeper holes will first go into this D vein. And here's the D vein. And so at the beginning of this year's program, we had these holes over here on the left-hand side, and then over to the right-hand side, consistent hits all the way through. You see here, these holes 146, 145, and they're 500 gram per ton material. Over here, you're in 400 gram per ton material, over 800 grams. This hole 125 is that 34 meters, a half kilo. And there was 9.7 meters, like 1,700 grams per ton inside of that. 90 meters above it, this hole 110 was that 650 grams over 17 meters of drill length. Incredible hits and open in all directions. So we had 450 meters defined here. The drilling right away this year, these holes over here, 152, 153, extended that to 650 meters. Now we're over here drilling way over here, another 400 meters away. So that's from these holes is over 1,000 meters. And so we're over here drilling now, and we're going to have a release out pretty soon. So we're just trying to find the edge of this thing. Still open to depth. In fact, the best one of the well, currently it's the best hole is the deepest hole so far.
So this D vein really seems like it could be kind of carrying this overall resource too. Right now, this is the highest grade and potentially the longest strike.
Yeah, longest strike and so far the best widths.
Yeah.
So that getting back to what I said earlier, these vein systems will classically have a key structure or maybe 3 or 4 key structures that will have the majority of the ounces. And those few zones make everything else around it work.
Yeah. Okay. Is more drilling going into this D vein, or is it still relatively spread out, the drilling from this year?
There's 2 drills on the D vein now. The first thing we want to accomplish is find the edge of the zone. Let's find the edge, and then let's go in and cover these big gaps with at least 100 meters spacing and if not a bit closer, and that'll enable us to do a resource estimate. And then we'll move one drill on to doing the similar things on like the B vein here. Very lightly drilled so far, but you see we're getting some nice hits in this vein too. 4.5 meters at 1,200 grams per ton, 2 meters over a kilo there in these wider zones, like 13 meters of over 400 grams, for example. So really, really a nice vein as well. So we need to come in here and just start stepping along and find the edges of that one. The other thing to find out, to point out on both the B vein long section and the D vein long section, see the elevation lines on the left-hand and right-hand side there. Here's the topography of the hill, of the caldera as you're walking out of the volcano. You can see when you're up high here above 1,800 meters, we hit vein here actually, but no values. But you get down to this grade line, which is generally we think of it being around 1,750 meters above sea level. Then you start to see your grade. As you're going down here, you see these holes go from nothing to sort of 100 gram, 200 gram, 300 gram, then 500 gram and kilo numbers. So you got to get down to that level.
Quite
And the
defined.
B,
Hey, so when you're looking for the extent of these systems, what sort of grade would make you think that, you know what, this grade just doesn't work, or this is as far as we're going to extend? Is it 100 grams per ton gold or silver equivalent? What's a number that investors could kind of look for?
well, these are classic veins, so they're going to be underground targets. It's going to be underground mining here.
Mhm.
And the rule of thumb for the cutoff grade for underground mining is about 180 grams silver.
Okay.
So you want to see 180 grams silver. Then the other thing you look at is the width,
Mhm.
because it takes about the same amount of time to blast a meter wide vein as it does one that's 10 meters wide. But with 10 meters, you're breaking 10 times more volume, at
Okay.
least. So the economics are a lot better. You're mining, in other words, as the wider the vein, the lower your mining costs, generally speaking.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Just wanted to put a number on that, since that's a big, really
Yeah.
goal of this program.
Yeah, so for underground, the general rule of thumb is 180 grams and up.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So B vein is the same story here. Geologically, this is like a candy store for geologists, because you got this thing perfectly preserved. You can walk from the top of your grade and your good vein and walk right out of the system till you really don't see it anymore. You just see little bits of breccia. In some cases, you don't even see the structure. You got to drill underneath to find it. It's just pinched out. And this long section shows the same thing as the D vein, these holes that are up high, no values. You do see vein there, but nothing in it. Then you got 46 grams. As you go deeper, you get under that 1,800 meters, you're seeing 200 gram, 300, 600 gram, and then kilos.
Yeah.
1,000 grams.
Very well defined, hey?
Yeah, it's textbook. This is a great place to actually run field schools for geologists and geologic students.
Okay. So this year,
So
right? 20,000 meters,
yeah,
all coming
20,000
to a maiden
meters.
resource.
And just a little correction on this slide here, first 5,020 funded. Now the full 20,000 is actually funded and underway.
Okay. So you're good to go. And does that fund the resource as well?
Yeah, we've got enough money for that. Yeah.
Okay.
And just the general plan map here, the D vein is stepping out along the trend until we find the edges. Yeah, like I said before. And that's how we lay the plan out, generally like this. You're always tweaking a little bit every time you drill a hole. Maybe the vein is shifted or moved a little bit, so you adjust your next hole accordingly.
Yeah. Very straightforward. You're still trying to find the extent of this mineralization in all these veins.
Yeah, that's right. So right now, focusing on that D vein, then we'll be moving one drill onto the B. And then after all of this, when we have enough density in the D and B areas, we'll be moving on to this JZ.
Okay. Straightforward. So what's the approximate turnaround time that you're seeing for assay results? Can you give us a general estimate?
You're seeing, I think generally about within 3 weeks, certainly.
Okay.
Right
So you're
now.
going to have a lot of drill results throughout the rest of this year.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Again, that's what we're going to be following up on.
Yeah.
Okay. Quick overview of the resources, then we'll be done here.
All right. So this is La Cigarra resource. It is 51 million and a half ounces in the measured indicated and 11 more in the inferred. 102 grams. So the new geologic model proved the old model, the resource model was diluting the grade. We went from 85 grams to 102. Really important because, as a paper exercise of looking what the economics might look like at 85 grams and $30 silver, it started to look pretty interesting. Like you want to start advancing this thing again. So now we have 102 grams and we have $30 silver. So we've updated this resource. We've got an area within the resource shell, even with the potential to add 10, maybe even 20 million more ounces. Huge upside potential here. There's main structures over 10 kilometers long. The resource sits up here in the upper right of this image. The green is our property. So as you follow that structure to the south, it disappears into valley cover. And then 20 kilometers away is this part of the district called Santa Barbara, San Francisco del Oro, where over 500 million of the ounces have been produced. And they're mining there today at 2,000 meter depth. And this resource comes right to surface. So that helps you imagine what the potential here and exploration wise may be. There's real great potential here. And this district's been mining for over 450 years. So it's one of those regions where once you get into production, you've got a real good shot at being able to replace reserves for a long, long time.
What sort of grades were we seeing in some of this historic production that's around this asset?
The La Cigarra resource at this particular location on the structure is kind of a series of sheeted veins. So it's like a sort of, imagine as disseminated sort of medium grade. But as you go to the south, it tightens up into more classic, narrower structure, which is what they're mining to the south, these more classic narrow veins. And so they're mining high grades. So they'll be mining 300 gram, 400 gram silver equivalent type grades there.
Okay.
And then the other resource project in Sonora State is Promontorio-La Negra projects. We updated that resource here to include the La Negra discovery. We really like La Negra, especially at this $30 plus silver price, because La Negra here is the resource body, forms that hill. So you see it lends itself to a nice, easy starter open pit in that case. And the grade for open pit's really excellent, like 129 grams. That's at a 40 gram cutoff.
Almost pure silver too, it looks like.
Yeah, it's basically silver. There's silver here and a little bit of gold credit that leaches. And the other thing we like about the project is that it's simple leach, and bit of metallurgical work we've done so far shows that you can get a real good recovery just with a leach circuit. And so it's got the potential to be, for a smaller company in Pan American, a nice high margin producer that could potentially produce, maybe a couple million ounces a year for something like 10 years. Still open to depth. There's still potential at depth. So it's just something we've got updated with our reporting, and we're waiting for this silver market to get more mature, and we've got it poised to be able to move it ahead.
Is there any relationship between La Negra and Promontorio here? Because La Negra, again, almost pure silver. Promontorio, it looks like very much a split between gold and silver with some other metals mixed in.
Yeah, it's a true polymetallic, silver, gold, lead, zinc. It needs a much higher silver price yet, but big diatreme hosted deposit, wide open to depth, exploration potential there, big resource sitting there, 7 kilometers away. The only sort of relationship is they're both breccia deposits. There's a diatreme, which is like a huge, it's a huge, not volcanic eruption, but steam eruption is what a diatreme is produced from. It's when all the groundwaters happen to hit a magma chamber and they flash into steam, and it just breaks everything and explodes. And those can be some really large deposits worldwide. And that's a setting there. And La Negra is another breccia. It's certainly a hydrothermal breccia. Don't really know if it's diatreme, but it's a much more defined breccia zone with some real nice grade to it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jim. Take us home.
Yep. Okay. So I'll just very quickly touch on the team here. I'm a geologist, been involved in the resource sector, junior resource sector, since 1988. A bottom line here, Ken Berry's our chairman. He put the Moss mine into production within about a 4-year period in Arizona, open pit gold mine. I was one of the founders of National Gold. It became Alamos Gold on the basis of the purchase of the Mulatos deposit in Mexico. And we've got John Morta, who was the CFO of Alamos. Joe Jufrey was the chief legal officer of Nevsun. Hans Smith is an advisor. He was a founder of Orla and Grade, and Grade was sold to Agnico on a discovery in Mexico that Agnico is mining today, and now Orla is a big discovery and now operating mine in Mexico. So Hans specializes in taking projects from sort of the resource stage to feasibility, key advisor to us. So what I'm pointing out here, Dale Britleaf's our VP of Exploration, Dr. Tom Richards, a former VP and still works with us. Tiziano Romanoli is a financer out of Geneva. He was head of Nesbitt Burns there one time, and was one of the early financiers of the Alamos Gold when we merged that and formed that company. So the point here is that this board is really well-rounded. Tony Retta was with Kamenak, which was sold to, I think, Kinross. We've got experience from grassroots prospecting, boot and hammer prospecting, to resource definition, mine building, and operations in our team. So really well rounded and a lot of depth there for a junior company, and also the experience of financing of every one of those stages. So that's it. We're drilling 2 drills here, focusing on Columba and getting ourselves to a maiden resource there. 20,000 meters planned. We're approximately 5,000 meters into that. So lots of news coming to the end of the year.
Absolutely. I'll follow up with you, Jim, as we get some of those drill results. And for everybody listening and watching to the replay of this webinar, feel free to email me at any time, fleck@kereport.com. If you have any questions for Jim, or even want any other information on some of the assets, the resources already defined within Kootenay Silver. Jim, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for walking us through this story. I'm going to follow up with you for some daily editorials, but then we're also going to update this webinar as this drill program progresses, especially to the end of the year. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. And Jim, thank you again for walking us through the Kootenay Silver story.
Thanks, Corey. It's been a pleasure.